Welcome to Local Control Scenario 3. In this scenario, we have a C-12 that's on the go, requesting closed traffic for multiple touch and goes. That means that the aircraft has to stay on runway 23 left for now. We also have a T-38 mid-lake bed on the flyby line, requesting closed on the go. We have a flight of two F-35s about East Lake Shore, and then we have an F-16 en route to High Key. What's important to remember here is it's not which action you choose to do, who you choose to be number one or number two. It's more important about how you do it. And then you want to be as efficient as possible. So we want to be safe and then expeditious. And then after we have those two things, we then want to reduce our verbiage as much as possible so that we can be clear and concise with authority. So I want you to pause this scenario here in a second, and I want you to write down who you think is going to be number one, number two, what you're going to say to them, and how you're going to issue control instruction to get them to where you want them to be. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video, and then we'll move on here in a second. Okay, now we've come to the point where what I would think that I would do depending on the scenario. And in this scenario, I marked out who I think I would talk to first. Number one, I'm going to talk to the Jester flight. The reason I'm going to talk to the F-35s is that they're about to report 5 mile final if they haven't already. And so I don't want them to call me in the middle of me trying to make my plan happen. I also don't want them to be waiting, going down final while I'm communicating to my other aircraft and they're trying to get each other in sight or reply back to me. And while Jester flight's coming down final, looking for that clearance. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to issue that landing clearance to Jester 2-1. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to my F-16. For my plan to work, what I want to do is I want to get the F-16 to be number 2. I want them to follow the flight on final, and I want them to be inside of a T-38 that's going to be for closed. This is my plan as it is for now. So I'm going to tell them Zoom 1, follow flight of two F-35s, 5 mile final, inside T-38 mid-lake bed flyby for closed. It's not necessarily important to tell them all the things about what I'm going to do with the T-38, other than that's my plan. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to the C-12. I'm going to tell Cobra 2 to extend upwind 1 mile, then make left close traffic. I'm not going to issue the traffic on the T-38 yet, because it's more important now at this point the T-38 is going to be closer to Westlake Shore that I initiate the next part of my plan. After the T-38 gets to Westlake Shore, I'm going to tell Cobra 38, climb to pattern altitude and make left departure and close traffic. Traffic, C-12 departure and upwind. I'm not going to tell them a sequence yet. I'm going to wait till the F-16 gets a little bit closer. Okay, so that's my plan at the moment. Now we're going to fast forward to the next section. Okay, the next section, here's where we're at. We have options here. This is an estimate of where they would be at this time. I think the F-16 would be close to High Key, if not at High Key at this point. You also have the T-38 between the departure and downwind and midfield downwind. For us, if it's a similar type fighter aircraft, High Key, 5 mile final, and midfield downwind are tie points. So this is very close to a tie point and could arguably be a tie point for the F-16 and T-38. And then we have the C-12 at departure and downwind, and it's really not a factor. So at this point, you have a choice. Do you want to make zoom number 1, or are you going to give them an orbit? So we took a risk getting to this point. It's up to us to decide. So there's 2 options I would think would be okay. If you want to take the option that's a little more bold, if you think the pilot that's going en route to High Key has been flying particularly quick, he's a zoom flight, he's not a Cobra or an ammo, so there's a good chance he's going to be able to do a little bit faster maneuver than the other aircraft that we mentioned. So one option would be to say Zoom 1, report low key, traffic to follow, 2 mile final, traffic inside of, departure and downwind. And then immediately I'm going to go to the T-38 and I'm going to say Cobra 38, traffic to follow, high key to low key, report in sight. That's important. I want him to get that aircraft in sight so he can help maintain VFR separation. And then I'm going to finally go to the C-12 and tell the Cobra 2 to follow T-38 departure and downwind. However, there's another option. If I didn't want to go that route, I can say Zoom 1, change the sequence, make 1 orbit to the north. We have to specify the direction that we spin him, and report 30 seconds to high key. 30 seconds to high key should be about a beam, the approach in of runway 23 left, outbound for his loop. The T-38, I'm then going to tell Cobra 38, change the sequence, follow flight of 2 F-35s, 2 mile final. Then finally, I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell the C12 the same thing as I would have told him in the first scenario. Cobra 2-2, follow T38, departure in downwind. Now this is the safe option. This is the easiest option to do, but it may not be the most expeditious. Again, it depends on the type of aircraft that are involved in the scenario and how they've been flying in your pattern. Maybe the down or maybe the tailwind might be a factor. It really depends. If those F-35s were C models and requesting a full stop, that could change the whole scenario. So this is just an option. However, let's assume that we go with the first option that I did. And I tell Zoom 1 to report low key, traffic to follow 2 mile final, traffic inside of departure and downwind. Go back to the T-38, Cobra 38, traffic to follow high key to low key, report traffic in sight. And then tell Cobra 2-2, follow T-38, departure and downwind. Again, it's the insight thing that I'm particularly interested in for the T-38. As we advance the scenario, it could look up something like this. Now, it's not an exact science going from high key to low key as far as where they're going to be at, how they're going to be. However, what's important to note is we have two options here at this point. These aircraft are not in a dangerous situation yet, but if we don't take further action or if he doesn't have them in sight, it could get to that point. So low key, as some of you remember, is 4,000 to 9,000 feet, and the downwind is 3,800 feet. So you're going to be below that altitude. However, it's not an exact science going to low key, and typically I think they're at least 4,500 feet at the approach and low key section as they're going into base key. So you have two options here. I did two routes. If the aircraft, the T-38 in this example, has the aircraft at low key in sight, I believe it's safe to say at that point you can tell that aircraft, Cobra 38, extend downwind, report base, or extend downwind, I'll call your base. He has that traffic in sight. He can safely maneuver as he extends downwind to avoid that traffic. The second option, if the T-38 does not have him in sight, I can tell him, Roger, transition to a south reentry. That means he's going to slide to an outside downwind and start climbing to 4,500, heading outbound. So again, having him in sight is critical in this scenario. And really, most of the time, this is not going to be a factor. The T-38 should have no problem looking straight up in his canopy and seeing that F-16. If it was a C-12 or something that has not a bubble canopy where he can't see directly overhead, it could be more of an issue, but I almost guarantee it's not going to be an issue. The flight paths are very similar, and all they have to do is look up, and they can see the huge, perfect profile of a dark color F-16 at low key. So this concludes scenario 3. I'm curious on what your guys' ideas were and what you had to think. Have a good day.